I'm Abi Cryerhall. I'm Excavation Director for Historical Archaeology on the Parramatta Light Rail project. So the Parramatta Light Rail project is a 12-kilometre light rail route from Westmead through Parramatta CBD area and out to Carlingford. And the light rail goes through quite a significant archaeological landscape of Parramatta. As we know, the history of Parramatta goes back many thousands of years, and it was a very with Aboriginal occupation, and it was a very important area in the initial days of the colony when the Europeans arrived. And part of the Parramatta Light Rail project, GML are providing archaeological and heritage services, and as part of that, just prior to construction, we're undertaking archaeological salvage excavations of several sites along the route, including the Cumberland Hospital East District, the Parramatta Town Drain, which is a convict built town drain, Queen's Wharf Reserve, and here where we're standing on Robin Thomas Reserve. Okay, so we're currently on the western edge of Robin Thomas Reserve, which is listed on the State Heritage Register as the ancient Aboriginal and early colonial landscape. So it's an archaeological listing, it's state significant, and the light rail comes through the western edge of the reserve, and because of that we've got to undertake archaeological salvage excavations in advance of that construction. And so what's important about Robin Thomas Reserve is we're sitting on what's known as the Parramatta sand body, which is a geological formation, and it's quite important as it in itself as a geological formation, but also as a sand body. It contains, or has potential to contain, stratified evidence of Aboriginal occupation over many thousands of years. But also on that listing, we're right beside the Parramatta River, and also for the listing is it was also the site of the first military barracks in Parramatta, established in 1791, and it was located here. The military barracks was located here because it was right beside the river landing, which is when the first Europeans came up the river and established what was then the convict or the penal settlement of Parramatta. And so we're at the end of, or towards the end of our what we call salvage excavations, which is where we do our detailed archaeological investigations, make a record of all the features and contexts and archaeological deposits that we find, and also retrieve the artefacts. So we've been working with our client Parramatta Connect since 2019 on the Parramatta Light Rail project. Our initial stages were to prepare some of the documentation that would guide the archaeological investigations and also provide some heritage advice. We also undertook test excavation in key areas to work out what the archaeological requirements were to undertake prior to construction, and we identified quite a number of sites that we needed to undertake archaeological excavations. And we've been doing that work since February, where we started on these major salvage excavations along the route, and we're now in September and we're nearing the end of our programme. So it's been a long campaign for archaeological excavations. We've done Aboriginal testing and salvage, and also historical archaeological testing and salvage. Okay, so the historical archaeological excavations at Robin Thomas Reserve have uncovered quite an extensive a range of evidence associated in particular with the 1790s military barracks. As we know, was one of the first military barracks in Australia. So the main barracks site is actually outside of our excavation area, so that will be preserved in Robin Thomas Reserve. But we catch just the edge of it, which is basically the back of house for the barracks, and back of house for barracks means cesspits, which are old toilets. Before we had sewer pipes and flushing away our sewage, people used to use long drops. I think you can still use them today when you go to national parks and things like that. But they're actually really interesting for archaeologists because they're often backfilled when they go out of use with rubbish and artefacts associated with the people who lived lived in the barracks at the time. So we've got two cesspits. They're made from brick, very early cesspits, and they were chock-a-block full of a huge range of glass and bottles, ceramics, and lots of bone, which is evidence of what the guys and the soldiers and the officers used to eat in the barracks. And yeah, so some of those artifacts are very rare. It's not often you get what we call sealed artifact deposits dating from 1790s to about 1810s in Parramatta, and so it's a very valuable collection. So after the military barracks, we know was from records was pretty poorly made, and it went into a state of disrepair and around towards the end of the 1810s. And when Governor Macquarie came in, he decided to build some better barracks. As we know, Lancer Barracks was built around 1818, and the soldiers moved to that. So this barracks at Robin Thomas Reserve fell into a little bit of disrepair. We know from the records that they sold off the building materials, or tried to auction off the building materials, but really not much happened for about 20 years on the site until we start getting some private development. So the archaeology associated with that, we've got some remains of some of the houses that were built along George Street, just the edge of Robin Thomas Reserve, and later in the mid-19th century, the whole of the reserve and a little bit back towards the south to Claycliff Creek became part of a commercial nursery known as the Somerset Nursery or the Purchase Nursery. So we have a lot of evidence associated with that phase. As I said, some structural remains of post holes and footings, but also nice sandstone drains and drainage systems, and a lot of pits full of, again, rubbish, which archaeologists love pits full of rubbish because they often contain lots of artifacts that tell us a lot about the people who lived here, and you know, what they ate, what they bought, and the kind of life that they lived. So once we finished our salvage excavations, we go into what we call the post-excavation analysis phase. It's where all our specialists will get to look at the collection that we've got from the site, and in particular the artifacts. And some of the key deposits are those cesspit deposits that I spoke about. They're very rare, and as I said, that we don't have very much evidence of what it was really like to be a soldier or an officer as part of the New South Wales Corps in the 1790s. We have what's officially recorded on records, but some of the artifacts actually might tell us a little bit more information about you know, what it was really like. And we know that the New South Wales Corps is also known by the nickname as the Rum Corps, and they're quite associated with some fairly significant events, such as the putting down of the Castle Hill or Vinegar Hill rebellion, and also the Rum Rebellion, which is where the military staged a coup in the government in New South Wales. So we've got a lot of those stories, but we don't really know what the everyday life was like fully for the soldiers and the officers. And I think the cesspits that we have, the assemblages seem to be quite a sort of a higher class assemblage, so we think it's probably assemblage from the officers. So that would be quite interesting to have a look. I mean, those guys were pretty you know, they were pretty ruthless in some degrees in the records, but we want to really have a look at those artifacts. So that will be the next phase. So we'll go into quite a significant phase of analysis and drawing in specialists, artifact specialists, and soil and pollen specialists to tell us a little bit about the environment and how that changed. And also, as part of the Parramatta Light Rail project, there will be an opportunity to interpret our findings and the archaeological findings. So that's hopefully where the results of our excavations and archaeological investigations will end up in a couple of places. Like, we'll have a pretty significant archaeological collection, which will be the artifacts and the archival material, like our records, for other researchers. But also then we'll have you know, sort of more public access or public information about our findings, which will be sort of available through either public interpretation or available on online sources. And we're still working on how that looks, but we'll have you know, sort of a time to work out how that plays out.